I can see what he says.
Something peculiar is happening in Japan. It's been happening for a while. People there, especially young people, don't seem to want things anymore. They've stopped going for promotions at their jobs, preferring to simply go through the motion at the office. They've stopped pursuing hobbies, preferring simple routines or passive entertainment.
Oh no.
They prefer renting over buying homes, public transport over buying cars, and they prefer to keep the money they saved as cash instead of investing into assets. Half of all marriages are either sexless or nearly sexless, and I probably don't need to tell you about the fertility rate,
Yeah.
which is at an all-time low. In fact, many young adults have stopped looking for love altogether. About 40
I can tell people here still want something, and it's his fucking jaw, because you guys won't shut up about it. Everybody here just wants his fucking jaw.
45% of them have not had sex for at least 12 months, and of those never married, about half are virgins. The Japanese management consultant Kenichi Omai was the first to describe this phenomenon as a low-desire society. In
Okay.
his book of the same name, he calls it, quote, Japan's unique, world unprecedented abnormality. It's as if Japan has given up on the idea of ambition. People are afraid of hope, and have become profoundly risk-averse as a result. As Omai puts it, quote, in Japan, men and women, young and old, all suppress their desires and put money into savings to minimize anxiety, even if only slightly. To explain how Japan come to be this way, I need to tell you a story about the rise and fall of the Japanese economic empire and its aftermath, which lingers to this day. Our story begins at the end of
I like this guy, and I'm interested. But, high level, if this is too long, my assumption is it starts with Japan's massive real estate bubble in the late 80s, early 90s. Then that pops. Then they get 3 decades of lost decades with really stagnant growth. And during that time, people lose interest in investing and growing for the future because the pie's not growing. And everything is propped up zombie company style by Japan's endless government debt. And now at the end of fucking history, nobody's I'm just jealous of the jawline, sure.
World War II. Having lost that war, Japan was in ruin. Its cities devastated, its economy shattered, and its people amongst the poorest in the world. So few expected that Japan was about to pull off an economic miracle the like of which the world had never seen. Over the next few decades, the country would embark on a remarkable period of unbelievable economic growth at a rate averaging about 10% per year. And by
Both Japan and Germany did this after World War II. It's pretty incredible. The growth of just West Germany alone and Japan in that period is like astronomical.
its end, Japan had become the world's second largest economy, just behind the US, with many expecting it to soon overtake the US and become the most dominant economy in the world. Japan was anything but a low-desire society back then. It was vibrant and
Wait, I watched this video last night. Yeah, this. This is one of those YouTube counter things for biggest economies by GDP starting in 1600. It's just interesting to watch. But like watch after 45. Dude, watch Japan here. Down, 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 off the charts. Then watch Japan. It's actually closer to the 80s. We gotta get way out here, but oh, past Argentina. Oh, past Canada. Oh, India, Italy, China. No, not France. Surely not France. They won the war. Past France and the UK. West Germany and Japan. Boom. Boom, boom, boom. Look at them both. Japan passed West Germany. Soviet Union, surely. Surely you're not getting past. Oh my God. '80s, and then this is when it gets into fucking high gear, right here. Boom! Look at this. The late '80s. Rocket ship. Oh my God. Early '90s, and then Plaza Accords right around here. Uh-oh. What happened there? Uh-oh. Uh-oh. And this is what they're living through. Stagnation. Decades of stagnation. This is the economic consequences of that, of increasing debt, lower growth. It's still shrinking. By the way, China. Wait, did we watch China after 2001? Look at China right here in 2001, WTO. Smaller than, you can go a little bit farther back, right here. China around the turn of the century. This is young Atrioc. Just thinking China, they're not that big. They fucking go crazy. Boom! Right around 2004, dude. Boom! Holy! Yeah, unreal. What's up, babe? Oh no!
Oh, what?
I didn't know you were gonna cook because I thought you were going out.
Why would you think that?
Well, now I have a pizza and meatballs.
Well, I can eat them then.
No, I want to eat them. They look delicious. They're way better than pizza.
What pizza did you? Oh.
I ordered I can't tell you what I ordered, but I ordered pizza because I watched a video on pizza and I got hungry.
Well, that's very stupid.
We have Stan's dog, by the way. This is Sophie. We're watching Sophie because Stans and Rochelle are gone. And she got the cone of shame. Dude, I can't believe Ari was making meatballs. I shouldn't have ordered this $30 pizza. All right, anyway, I want to watch this Japanese video. This guy seems like a Chad.
Ambitious.
I like how
People
he talks.
dreamt big and worked hard. They aimed for the moon and some got there. The streets were packed with brand new cars, stores always crowded with people. The appetite for new experiences seemed endless. Everyone wanted to get ahead, buy homes, start families, and enjoy the good life. It seemed like the good time would never end, but all good things come to an end, and the end for Japan's golden years was near. The decades of rapid growth had become unsustainable, resulting in an asset bubble. For example, despite being 25 times smaller than the US in terms of landmass, Japan's total land value was worth more than that of the entire US, times 4. Tokyo's real estate value, in particular, had become so astronomical.
Is he going to mention the classic line everyone talks about is that the Imperial Palace was worth more than all of California. The real estate, and like 100 square meters around the Imperial Palace is worth more than... It's the classic line about Tokyo's real estate bubble.
High that the Tokyo Imperial Palace, an area of just 3.4 square kilometers, were said to be worth more than all the real estate in California combined. The signs of an economic...
Hand of God, not pre-watched. This is the power of reading. I just want you guys to know that when you read, the world unlocks for you. You just read things. Everyone's pulling from the same sources, bro. Just read a couple books and all of a sudden you're going to feel like this all the time.
Economic bubble were there, and, at least in hindsight, obvious. For example, people were buying things just to buy them, regardless of how random or useless they might seem, like golf club memberships that cost as much as $3 million.
Jesus
At one
Christ.
point, Japanese corporations seemed to have literally run out of things to buy in Japan and started buying things in foreign markets too. They bought the Rockefeller Center in New York for $1.4 billion, Columbia Pictures for $3.4
Oh,
billion
yeah, they did do
dollars,
that.
and Universal Pictures for
Yeah,
$6.6
they
billion
bought all the
dollars.
American movie
There were
studios.
concerns at the time that Japan was buying up too many foreign assets. Some worried that Japan might one day buy up the entire US or the whole world. Perhaps Japanese investors have become accustomed to seeing prices going up that they stop worrying about how much they cost today, expecting to always be able to sell it for more in the future. That was until that future came crashing down. In 1989, the Bank of Japan decided to raise interest rates sharply.
There's no other country, right, who's experiencing huge debts with asset prices that constantly go up, and everyone thinks they'll always go up in the future. There's nobody else that can learn a lesson from this. Japan is I guess what you're saying is Japan was stupid and no one else has made this mistake.
Hoping it would keep the rampant asset speculation and inflation under control. It worked. Or rather, it worked too well. The asset bubble burst, causing a downward economic spiral. The crash started with the stock market in 1990, and the real estate market soon followed in 1991. Asset prices, which people assumed would keep rising, began to fall and kept falling. The stock market would go on to lose 80% of its value in the following decade, and the real estate market 70%. Businesses and banks who had overextended themselves to acquire these assets were left holding nothing but massive amounts of debt, and bankruptcies and layoffs soon followed. People who were rich on paper watched as their wealth turned to ashes before their eyes. What followed wasn't just a quick recession, but a long, drawn-out economic stagnation that would come to be known as Japan's lost decades. It's called the lost decades because nothing really happened economically during those decades.
Nintendo.
The GDP more or less stopped growing, with stagnating wages and deflating prices. The effects of this economic malaise remained to this day. Tokyo's real estate market never recovered to the height of its heyday, and the Japanese stock market only went back to its pre-crash value last year. To say that people learned their lessons,
Dude, think about that. It only got back to if you bought at the highs, you didn't get it back till fucking 30 years.
only went back to its pre-crash value last year. To say that people learned their lessons is an understatement. Perhaps they learned it too well. People didn't just grow cautious, they became pessimistic. Not only are they preparing for the worst, they expect the worst too. Ambition always ends in frustration seemed to have been the lesson many internalized. So instead of chasing big goals, they now gravitate towards stability, steady income, simple routines, and cash on hand. Those who grew up during this era of quiet resignation, who are the young people working and living in Japan now, will come to comprise the bulk of the low desire society.
Dude, don't you kind of see this in America now in some way? And we're not even in the bubble burst. I feel like with younger people, you see more people that are like, yeah, I just want simple things. I just want, I'll be happy with just a good commute and a job that I don't hate and whatever. Like, I feel like you hear about it more and more. Yeah, I get my gaming PC and my cat, and I'm happy, and I don't need. Yeah, I definitely feel like that. Then, counterpoint. I don't think that's a bad attitude to have. Maybe society wide, there's problems. I think specifically when it crosses into like the inability to get relationships or a family. I think that's the problem. And I think housing being so expensive makes that mindset impossible because you have to. But I think it's nuanced because there is some beauty in not having. I think one of the coolest things you can do is not be on the hedonic treadmill where like any money you make immediately goes into being spent so you can get something new, so you can move up. Like being happy with what you have is awesome because then you can actually get stability. Anyway, I like this guy's presentation style.
These people
Like,
never.
this is the most non-YouTube video we've watched in a while. This guy's just talking. He's got videos that help explain his point, but it's not I don't feel like he's constantly trying to trick my brain into watching more, which makes me like it more. He's just speaking clearly, and it's a little slow paced. I understand if your brain is completely rotted out of your skull, but it's not boring. It's interesting stuff, and I appreciate his authenticity.
Very experienced the bullet train pace of rising living standards their parents did. Instead, they've grown accustomed to
He also has a
stagnation,
nice jaw.
where the absence of progress is the norm. They know about the massive layoffs and bankruptcies from giant corporations that once looked too big to fail, and understood job security to be illusory. Wages stay the same anyway, so why work that hard? Prices remain low anyway, so why buy assets? Fortunately, low prices also mean that things are cheap. Rent is low enough, and the Japanese public transport works.
He's gonna talk about it. This is the problem. This is what all my videos about Japan are about, which is like this stagnation system sucks, but it works as long as prices of things stay low. As long as you don't have inflation. Once you get inflation, the whole thing breaks and people go from being I don't care to angry. So it's funny because I think they're actually past this I don't want things phase. I think they're in the angry phase. They're in the I can no longer afford shit, and now we're
Food is affordable, well, except rice. That's a long story for a different day, but for the most part, the cost of living is conveniently affordable in the never-ending array of 100 yen shops and convenience stores. This allows people to get by with even a modest income. So before long, people start thinking, let's just keep our heads down and we'll survive. Don't try anything bold. Live below our means and save what we can. Walk carefully through life so that we may arrive safely at death. Now I'm noticing that this might start to sound a bit depressing. It would seem that there's something wrong with a low desire society, that it's a problem that needs to be fixed. But is it a problem, really? And if it is a problem, whose problem is it? Now, first of all, from the perspective of the economy, low desire society is indeed a problem. In fact, the book Omaya wrote about low desire society is largely a book about the Japanese economy. Low desire society is an economic problem because desire lies at the root of any economic systems. Everything that happens in an economy, from the money invested to the employees hired, to the products built in factories and sold in stores, everything happens for the purpose of fulfilling people's desires. So if people stop having desires, the entire economic machinery will grind to a halt. After all, why have an economy at all if no one wants anything anymore? As such, to be a low desire society is to have an underperforming economy. And the data reflects this. Japan's real GDP per capita has been growing at an average rate of 0.7% per year since the crash of the 1990s, a fraction of what it was before the crash and one of the lowest amongst all G7 nations. As such, low desire society has been a thorny problem for Japanese politicians and policymakers who were elected to manage the economy and re-elected based on how well they did. They've been struggling to fix this for decades, and I don't blame them. They have on their hands an economy notorious for being uniquely difficult to manage. The Nobel Prize-winning economist Simon Kuznets once said that there are...
Is this 4 type of countries? Argentina, Japan, and everyone else? Fuck, I could have called this one too. I could have called this before the fucking first line came up, dude.
4 types of countries: developed, underdeveloped, Japan, and Argentina. In other words, Japan's economy is so strange that Kuznets thinks it should be its own category. One of the reasons for this is, again, that people don't want things. And as a result, economic interventions that work everywhere else just don't seem to work in Japan. You see, most ways to boost GDP involve injecting money into an economy in one way or another to stimulate its activities. That works because when you give money to people, they spend it or invest it, as one does with one's money. That in turn boosts economic activities and some inflation. But when you give money to...
I feel like Uma Musume must have saved Japan's economy, though, right? All the money that you fucks are spending on those horses has got to be flowing into their coffers and turning this whole thing around.
To Japanese people, they don't buy anything because they don't want anything. They don't invest it either because they are risk averse. So they mostly end up saving it as cash. In other words, when you inject money into the Japanese economy, it just disappears, like the darkness at dawn.
Like the darkness at dawn.
Okay, so low desire society is a problem for the economy and a pain in the ass for the politicians. But let's take a break from the abstraction of economy and politics for a moment. Let's get real for a bit.
Let's get
and
real.
talk about people. By people, I mean those real individuals who live and work in Japan today. Modern economic and political systems are, at least on paper, meant to serve the people, after all.
Yeah.
So how does this low desire phenomenon impact the people? Is it a problem for them? That is, from their personal perspectives, is it really a problem to have low desires? Well, there the question becomes more nuanced, because it's not obvious why it's a problem for someone to have low desire. Do people have to have a lot of desires? Is it bad if someone happens to not want anything?
What an interesting question.
Look, if I truly don't...
I want to think before he answers. I just want to think. It's a very interesting question. There's something zen about minimizing your desires. I think as a broader society, it feels like you go into stagnation and death if everybody stops wanting more or to improve what they have. Like the idea that the people in Japan don't want a Ford F-150 is disgusting to me. But I feel like I want to separate it from I think it's a reverse problem. It's not like they suddenly don't want the things, they can't afford them. They can't, like if they could afford them, their desire would instantly change. You know? It's like it only exists because they can't have it. So your philosophy comes afterwards.
want anything, and I'm just sitting here, chilling upon this chair, in a state of perfect comfort and contentment within my own skin. I can't see how anyone can convince me that I have a problem. Quite the contrary, what I have looks like the complete absence of problems. In fact, it seems that I would only start to have problems when I begin to want things I don't have, where the unfulfilled desires begin to induce suffering. So am I saying that having low desire is not a problem, rather it is having desire that is the problem?
This is Buddhism, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I'm the one saying that, but Buddha might have said something like that a few thousand years ago. My friends, we have stumbled upon an age-old paradox in many schools of spiritual and philosophical discourse.
Honestly, I just think me and this guy are fucking on this. I like this guy. I straight up like this guy. I feel like me and this guy reads the same shit. I would hang out. Me and this guy would have a fucking nerdy ass conversation over beers. It would be awesome. Just two bad bitches agreeing with each other. Bro, reach out. Let's hang out. Asian Atrioc?
The question of how to live a fulfilling life. Because there seems to be two contradictory ways to do it. You can either get what you want, or you can want what you have. To put it another way, you can either fulfill your desires, or you can lower your desires. And in many ancient teachings, having low desire is not only not a bad thing, but often viewed as a virtue. There is the famous story of Socrates, for instance. He went window shopping in the Athenian marketplace one day and looked at all the beautiful items on display that people could buy and said, "Wow, isn't it great? Look at all this shit that I don't want." Or the more academic translation, "How many things I can do without." Now, I don't think that ancient wisdom says that having desires is always bad, but it does point out this tension between getting what we want and wanting what we already have as seemingly contradictory strategies in living a good life. One of my favorite stories that illustrates this tension is the one between Alexander the Great and Diogenes the Cynic. Alexander the Great is, of course, one of the champions of having a lot of desires and getting them fulfilled. He's won wars and conquered kingdoms and gone down in history as one of its most famous high achievers. Diogenes, on the other hand, was a minimalist philosopher who lived in absolute austerity. He was basically homeless and slept in a barrel. It was said that he once had a cup that he used to drink water. Then he saw a child drinking water with his hand, so he realized that even the cup was unnecessary and got rid of the cup. So the meeting between these two characters was bound to be interesting. When Alexander went to see Diogenes, Diogenes was lying on the ground, bathing in the sun. Alexander stood in front of him and said, Bro, I am Alexander, king of Macedon. Wise Diogenes, name your desire. If it's within my power, I'd be happy to grant it to you. Diogenes looked up and replied, Dude, that's great. In that case, could you stand a bit to the side because you're blocking my sun? Now the question is, who is better?
Yeah, we watched the
Is
video
it better
with
to
this.
be Alexander, who had big goals and through the disciplined application of his efforts and intelligence achieved them? Or is it better to be Diogenes, who simply skipped all that and was happy and content exactly as he was? Now, to be fair, Alexander and Diogenes
Is it better to be Alexander the Great or Diogenes, the guy who slept in dog piss? Maybe. I don't know.
do seem to represent the two
Who's to
extremes
say?
of a spectrum. One is a massive overachiever, and the other is a complete non-achiever. So maybe the answer to our question lies somewhere in the middle, a healthy medium where one does have some desires and work hard, but also have some semblance of work-life balance. Now that answer sounds sort of right, but it's not my favorite answer. For one, it doesn't fully answer the question. If there's a healthy medium, where is that medium exactly? In other words, how much desire
Yeah,
is
I get your point, but also like we don't need to figure out the exact medium to know that Japan, which is in a birth crisis and is going to like disappear in 2 generations, economic stagnation that is leading to reduced quality of life every year. People are poorer than their parents. You know, like clearly this isn't it.
the optimal amount of desire to have? The answer is not very specific in this regard, so it's a little lazy, I think. And secondly, it implies that amount is the key to our question. But is amount really the center of the bullseye here? Now there's another answer that I prefer, and that answer lies in the ending of our story between Alexander and Diogenes. Apparently the conversation with Diogenes blew Alexander's mind. So as he was leaving, he was in a pensive mood. While his men were making
Sounds
fun
like
of Diogenes
broke
and
cope.
telling Alexander that he shouldn't take Diogenes seriously, Alexander said, If I weren't Alexander, I would like to be Diogenes. Some people interpret this as Alexander being envious of Diogenes, but I think it's deeper than that. If you look at what Alexander actually said, he didn't say, Bruh, I wish I could be Diogenes. He said, If I weren't Alexander, I'd like to be Diogenes. In other words, it implies a lack of choice to some degree, in that Alexander couldn't be Diogenes even if he wanted to, because he was, in fact, Alexander. It
Okay.
points to an interesting
I get it.
fact of life, that in the end, we're all condemned to be ourselves.
Ooh,
We can resist that fact all we want. We might not like ourselves. We can refuse to accept ourselves. We can disown or hate ourselves. We can even
course.
put on masks and pretend to be someone else. But deep down, we are who we are. We can't run away from ourselves no matter how hard we try. Now, I'm not saying that people can't change, but I am saying that, for better or worse, each of us have our own uniqueness, our capacity to change included. For example, Alexander
this is very different. This is very different than the start of this video. I was like, this is not about the economic state of Japan. I don't think.
couldn't be Diogenes because he was Alexander. He was someone who naturally had a lot of
I got tricked
desires
into a
and
philosophy
was
video.
drawn to take actions towards them. However, he could, at any moment, choose to suppress his ambition, give up the throne, and sleep in the
You got
barrel
my
next to
ass.
Diogenes. I don't know if that would have made him happier, but he did have the freedom to choose that life for himself. Now, we all know that in reality, Alexander chose to pursue his desires instead, and the rest was history. That was the decision Alexander made, with him being who he was. And each person will need to make that decision for themselves, based on who they are and what they authentically desire. So the key to our question isn't amount. There isn't an optimal amount of desire a person should have. Rather, it
Okay.
is authenticity. Namely, what is your authentic desire, given who you truly
I think this guy wanted to talk about this, and he packaged it in Japan economics so he could get people like me to watch. I think he opened with Because this is not even like this is not related, really. It's not. They're not making this choice on a philosophical level. I mean, it worked.
They are,
I
and
got
what will you
marketed.
decide to do about it? Now that's easy to say, but very difficult to do. In fact, it's three separate, very difficult things. The awareness to know ourselves, the wisdom to decide what to do about it, and the courage to take action on that decision. To illustrate how easily one can fail at all three of these things, here's an example from my life. After graduating college, I worked for 2 years as a corporate consultant. I was pretty miserable through most of it, probably because I hated the job, but for a long time I thought I loved that job because everyone around me loved that job, and they loved me having that job. My Chinese parents became happy for the first time in their lives, and I was constantly receiving LinkedIn messages from university students asking me to show them how they could get that job too. And my colleagues, oh my goodness, they were so enthusiastic and passionate about getting into good projects and networking and going for promotions and everything else that came with a consulting career. So I was taken in by all that. I thought I was lucky to get that job and should work hard and progress in that career. In other words, my desire for a consulting career was not my...
I mean, I do relate. I remember. I've told this story, but like this is like 3 or 4 years into my time at Twitch. I've told this. I remember distinctly being on the bus to go to work and looking out the window and realizing, like, this is my job that I dreamed of my whole life. And I am not happy. I had that exact thing. I'm like, I'm not happy. I'm not enjoying this. And like, I'm dreading it. And and I remember having that distinct feeling. And it led to me leaving Twitch. I went to NVIDIA because I was like, but I think that was more to do less with, people would be like, that's any job. I think it was specifically with how horribly Twitch was managed. It was a company where you really felt like you had no opportunity to do good work. You had to just play a game with somebody's favor.
Authentic desire. It was not my desire, really. Rather, it was conditioned into me by my social environment. And the closer I got towards this fake desire, the further away I drifted from my authentic desires. Stephen Pressfield calls this the shadow career, where you work in a career that you don't care about to avoid working on what you do care about. Now, it took me a long time and a great deal of needless misery to see that. It took me even longer to come to the decision to quit my job, and longer still to work up the courage to actually do it. All this is to say that given how malleable we are to our social programming, we're quite capable of being very confused about what we genuinely want, let alone knowing what to do about it and actually doing something about it. Now, what this means about the low desire society phenomenon is that whether it is a problem for an individual comes down to whether their low desire is authentic. For example, there are people who have low desire because that's who they genuinely are. They are like Diogenes, who have seen through the social programming that tries to keep them tied down to the culture of endless consumerism and decided not to be a part of it. They refuse to keep up with the Joneses and are genuinely content in the absence of incessant wants and needs. To these people, having low desire is not a problem. In fact, we have much to learn from them. All power to them, as far as I'm concerned, and politicians should stop bothering these people with their economic interventions, because asking these people to have more desire in order to boost the economy would be futile and annoying. But there's another category of low desire individuals.
I just agree with it. I just don't agree, actually. I think the whole thing's backwards. I don't think Japanese people fundamentally changed their DNA between the 80s and the 2000s. They didn't suddenly become different human beings that are more widespread, hardcore Buddhists against desire. That certain human beings, I'm sure, have less desires and they're more happy outside of the system. But that's, as a society-wide thing, it's only in response.
These people do have low desire is indeed a problem. Insofar as politicians might want to do something productive, these are the people they should try to help. But politics aside, this is first and foremost a personal problem, because ultimately, only we can be the one to put our own feet in front of one another towards our own unique journeys. People may
Yeah, I disagree. I don't think it's first and foremost a personal problem. That's a good way to look at it from a personal standpoint, I guess, but that's not.
help us along the way, but they can never do it for us, especially not the government. So I hope that those who are shunning their dreams find the courage to take their first step and keep walking. And I hope we too find the inspiration in their story to do the same in our own lives. I heard that there are only 2 mistakes along this journey: not starting and not finishing. Thank you.
Still, I liked it a lot. I still liked it a lot. The rise of homeless streamers in China.
These people
I still liked it a lot. Cool YouTuber. And he's probably got a 10-part series on mewing if you want to get a jawline like his. He's only got 39K subs, and I did like the video. I'm going to hit a sub button here. Subscribed.